Thank you for sharing your story. Next up, we have Assembly Member Joanne Simon, also an A10731 co-sponsor. Assembly Member.
Assembly Member, you're muted. I'll unmute you.
Right. Okay, so I thanked you. Sorry about that. So anyway, thank you all. Thank you, Yasmin and Teens Take Charge and Jamila for your really very compelling discussion about this, and Emanuela. It is really so critical that we undo this law. You spoke, Jamila, about the test itself. And that is something that I have been focusing on because of my particular background. And the reality is it's not even a good test. So there's this whole buildup of these assumptions that if you do well on this test, you're smart. And if you are below the cutoff, you're not as smart or you're not as prepared. And somehow or other, those students who don't score above the cutoff, which is limited by the number of seats that they have and nothing else really, somehow or other, you're not as smart or as capable. It is very much, as you have all noted, a product of a racist intent, but also the whole standardized testing industry is essentially about keeping people out. It is about making sure that the right people get in. And there are lots of arguments about meritocracy, that somehow or other this will elevate all boats, but in fact the history of standardized testing on the whole is racist, and the outcomes have been racially disproportionate. So and the SHSAT as a test is probably one of the worst because there is so much error in this test, and I won't get into all of the detail that I usually go into about standard error of the measure, but that's really where a lot of the key is, that you can really show how bad this is. Jamila, you mentioned that the test was recently revised, and it's been revised over time, but when they revise it, they never validate it. And so what's the key here is that it's valid. It tests what it is it's supposed to be testing. And we don't have any information on the validity of it once upon a time when it first was created in the early 70s. We sure as heck know that it can't be valid now because that validation has never been done with the various modifications to the test. I also want to just say that, we've all heard arguments that if we improve the schools, this will be better. We can certainly improve our schools. We can do a lot to provide our students with more opportunities. We can do a lot to get rid of screens and make sure that our school system is less segregated than it is now. It shouldn't be. And there are a lot of ways to do that, but none of that really has anything to do with this test. And this bill doesn't actually impose any of the plan that the city had last year. There was another bill. This bill just says, you know what, the state should not be in the business of making this decision for a city high school or any of the city high schools. We don't do this for any other school district in the state. We don't do it for other New York City schools. It's just these few schools, and the state really shouldn't be in the business of doing that. The city then is free to make the policies it wants to have, and I encourage all of you to be as actively engaged as you possibly can with what the city does once we hand this back to them, that admissions to the specialized high schools should be a function of the New York City Board of Education, New York City Department of Education, and how the city goes about it is entirely up to the city. And we all want to work with you to advocate for a fair and equitable system for admissions to the specialized high schools, but the state shouldn't be in charge of that. And so this bill just gets the state out of the business of doing that. And so I want to thank you again for all of your support, for all of your action and your activity on this issue, and pledge to you that I will continue to keep working on this. And I'm looking very much forward to getting this bill passed this year because, as you have all said, now is the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Simon. And thank you for describing how this 100% is an overreach of state power. Repealing this bill is about taking the power back into the city and doing what's necessary for our students. Next up.